Welcome to the March 2023 CIECA webinar. I'm Paul Berry, Executive Director of CIECA. The Collision Industry Electronic Commerce Association, or CIECA, develops and promotes electronic communication standards that allow the collision industry to be more efficient. We also provide webinars like this one to help educate both members and non-members on trends that impact systems, processes, and the exchange of data across the industry. Today's presenter is Ryan Taylor. Ryan started his first body shop when he was 17 years old, which he grew into an MSO with locations across Canada. He is the founder of the CRM software BodyShop Booster and is president of the AMP Bureau. Today's topic is how to adapt to the speed of change in the collision industry without getting crushed. Before I turn it over to Ryan, I want to point out that there is no verbal communication between the participants and the presenter. If you have any questions during the webinar, please type them in the questions panel on the webinar screen. We will answer as many questions as possible at the end of the presentation. And now I'll turn the program over to Ryan Taylor.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me, everybody. I'm excited to be here. This is a topic that I get excited about. I get passionate about. So why don't we jump right in? We're going to talk about adapting to the speed of change without getting crushed. And one of the things that really caught my eye out there is the automotive industry is going to see more change in the next 10 years than it's experienced in the last 100 years, which is really interesting. So as I started thinking about this segment I was going to do with you folks today, I was looking at some data points. So check this out. Here's a couple data points. 72% of leaders feel they're lagging behind the speed of which technology is advancing. 72%, that's kind of crazy. And they're telling us that they're feeling stuck. 88% of leaders believe technology is crucial to their survival, but they're not sure how to adapt or what steps to take. So as I was thinking about what steps we can take on this webinar and share with you, I thought I'd share a little video of how some of these folks are feeling. So here we go. Let's see if this plays.
Whoa, that's not good.
Oh, I don't need this. I'm already late.
Somebody will come. Anybody have that?
Right? And so I love this little video because it kind of embodies where sometimes things get stuck and we feel like, oh man, things have stopped or things have changed. The escalator that once was working isn't working anymore. So what steps can I take as a leader or as somebody in our industry to really move forward? So that was really what I wanted to do today, was share 3 easy steps that are helping some of the great leaders around the world adapt to the speed of change. And so one of the best ways I can share this with you is to tell you about what's called upstream positioning. And this is something that was taught to me by some really influential people, actually. And so I'll give you a little bit of my background and my story. Paul had already alluded to, my background starting my first body shop when I was 17. And here's me. At the age of 17, I got this bright-eyed, bushy-tailed idea to just graduate high school, and rather than be an astronaut or a fireman or whatever kids are wanting to be these days, I decided I wanted to get in the body shop world. So here I am. I took my life savings. I found this old industrial building in an industrial park where people were scared to go to, and I thought I'd be successful, right? And so I ran headlong into a major problem. And here's a news clip from way back in like 1996 of me with my first little shop, and I was trying to get awareness out there. But look at me, here I am, I'm 17 years old, I've got acne, my voice is cracking, right? I was like going through, I don't know, some changes at that time in my life. But would you trust a kid like this to fix your car? Put it in the chat box. I mean, let me know, would you trust a kid like this to wash your car, let alone fix it, right? So I ran headlong into this problem where people were like, I go and do sales calls, I go and talk to insurance agents and dealerships and whatever, and I would get shut down. They would just look at me like, I wouldn't trust you within 10 feet of my car. And so I had to find a different way. I had to take some steps in a different direction. And so what I started doing is I would call ahead. And I'd call them and I'd say, hey, I'm new in town. I just started a new body shop. I wanted to see if I could bring you a coffee and talk about some of the new technology that we've got that's going to really help you and your customers. And invariably, most of them would say, sure, come on by. And I'd say, great, what do you take in your coffee? And they'd say, oh, whatever, cream or sugar or whatever. And so I would bring them a coffee and I would drink a coffee. And I'd still walk in the door and they'd kind of do this thing like, whoa, that guy's pretty young looking. But what would happen is I would drink the coffee with them and they give me a little bit of their time. And it was just enough that I needed to get my foot in the door with these folks. And I'm like, this is working. And then I decided, like, wait a minute, if I brought a larger coffee, what would happen? And so what I learned is the larger the coffee I would bring them, the more time they would spend with me. And I thought I was a genius, right? I'm like, this is great. They're spending more time with me. I'm getting more work. I'm getting my foot in the door. Now, there's a problem. Picture this, I'm 17 years old, right? And I just had done maybe 10 sales calls in a day, and I drank 10 large coffees. I didn't know there was such a thing as decaf coffee. So by my last sales calls of the day, I was so jacked up on caffeine, I was doing more damage than good. I think I was scaring people, right? But the interesting thing, the reason I share this story with you is because a friend of mine said, right around the same time, he came to me and he says, Ryan, I want you to meet Zig Ziglar. In the chat box, let us know if you've ever heard of Zig Ziglar. But Zig Ziglar was a powerhouse. He was a motivational speaker, an incredible coach, and he, for a short while in my life, became like a mentor. But at this first event I went to, I'll never forget what he shared with us. He says, when you help enough people get what they want in life, you will always get what you want. And this is the human trigger of reciprocity. And I realized the reason I told you the coffee story, because in a small way, what I realized is, by giving them a coffee, they gifted me their time in return and ultimately their work, right? That was reciprocity. It was the early stages. And Zig Ziglar said he built his career, his entire life around this purpose. And for me, I adopted this purpose. And we ended up taking this and looking at it through the lens of, what can we do to help our customers? What can we do to help our insurance partners, other people in our industry, even competitors? If we approach the market that way, how will it help us grow? And it did. It helped us grow to the point where just a few years later, I managed to grow it to 8 body shops, and we also had a large national hail team. And we were fixing about 200 vehicles per day in the busy season. So that was a little bit of a fast forward moment for you. But the reason I go through this is I want to talk about that upstream, that upflow thinking. And so what really prompted me to go down this path was the sucker punch, I call it, but it was like this blow that I got out of nowhere. And so we're cruising along. You saw that we were fixing lots of cars, and I get the phone call from my largest insurance partner. And this guy's name was Keith, and he calls me, and I see the phone ringing, and I pick it up, and I'm like, hey, what's happening, Keith? And he says, hey, Ryan, I just wanted to give you a courtesy call. And I'm like, oh, okay, what's up? He's like, well, I wanted to let you know that we've changed directions internally. We've changed things internally. We're going to go ahead and shut all 8 of your body shops off at the end of the month. And I'm like, whoa, like what? Is it me? Is it my KPIs? Am I not performing enough for you? And he's like, no, it's nothing you did. It's just we went in a different direction. We went with a national provider, and we're going to shut all your stores off. And I was completely dumbfounded. I didn't know what to do. So my knee-jerk reaction was to go out and start spending big dollars on marketing. So I started spending about $95,000 to $100,000 a month in our market on radio and TV and print and social media and door-to-door. We did all this stuff to try and build our business, and it wasn't very effective. And so a friend of mine told me, he's like, why don't you hire this team of researchers? And they're behavioral scientists that they'll come into any market, any industry, they'll analyze it, they'll tell you how everything works, and you can really map out why traditional marketing isn't working, why traditional ways of doing business don't work very well in the collision industry. And so I ignored him, because I'm not exactly the brightest bulb in the hallway. So I ignored him for quite a while, continued doing the things that weren't working. That's the definition of insanity, right? Do the same things over and over again that aren't working. And finally, I just had enough of it. And I hired this team of researchers and behavioral scientists to come in. And so they sat down and they mapped out the customer journey, okay? So this is the way a customer flows through our industry. And it was an incredible experience. They took a very long time to do it, but when they were finished, they had a 5,000-page document that was quite robust. And one of my friends always says, if you want to impress somebody, make it complicated, right? Make it complicated. But if you want to help somebody, like Zig Ziglar says, if you want to help somebody, keep it simple, right? So got to keep it simple. So what I decided to do was take this big study, this research project, boil it down for you today in a simple analogy that will help you position yourself in our ecosystem a little bit differently. So let's get into it. And the first thing you need to understand is our product class is very different than what a lot of people think. There's really only two product classes out there. Let me unpack this for you. So product class number one, this is where 95% of people focus is on this product class. It's called an impulse buy. So an impulse buy might be like a new vehicle, or maybe you want to go get that new watch, or maybe it's some furniture for your house, a couch, a sofa, an ottoman, whatever you guys call that, right? And so an impulse buy comes with a high degree of purchase motivation. In other words, it's something that people actually want. Does that make sense? Okay. And so people are motivated, they're excited, they're going to go online, they're going to research it, right? They're going to look these things up. However, on the flip side of this coin, the second product class is what we call a distress purchase. So when the behavioral scientists looked at this, they're like, wow, this is very, very different. The body shop, the collision world is very, very different. It's kind of like flood restoration, right? Imagine you woke up this morning and there's water in your basement. That would be a distress purchase. Or the doctor, you go and see the doctor, and they're like, hey, I'm sorry, you got this, this disease. Well, that's a distress purchase. Or an accident, that is a distress purchase. In other words, it has no degree of purchase motivation. People don't want it. Does that make sense? So you'll see people lined up at the Apple store to go and get the new Apple iPhone 24X or whatever's coming out, right? But you'll never see people excited to line up for collision repair. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, sweetheart, I can't wait to get T-boned today. Right? Nobody does that. And so it's a very, very different buying mind frame. Is that making sense? Okay. So very different way that a customer or a vehicle owner goes through this experience. And the situation is this. There's a couple things that we can't control. Number one, we can't get people to investigate. We can't get people to go online and start researching things like they would a new car. They're not going to do that if they don't have an accident. The second thing is we can't create interest. I can't send Paul or Stacy out in the parking lot with a sandwich board that says today and today only, if you go and get in an accident, I'll give you 75% off, right? Nobody's going to go and intentionally get in an accident. They just won't do it. And the last thing about our situation in our industry is we can't legally build demand. Okay, and the reason I said legally is because I had to change that. I was, just a fun fact, I was speaking at an event in Georgia, not beating up on people from Georgia. We love them. But this guy was in the crowd. There's about 150 people there. And he raises his hand. He says, actually, Ryan, I can build demand. I'm like, oh, wow. Like, I'm willing to be corrected. Like, I don't know everything. Like, tell me, like, how do you build demand? I thought you couldn't. He's like, well, he says, I've got this old pickup truck. And I'm thinking to myself, where's he going with this? It's like, well, I got this old pickup truck. And so I drilled holes in the box, in the bed. And I'm thinking to myself, this is weird. Like, what's he doing? He says, and it's deer season. So what I do is I roll back my tonneau cover and I fill it with salt and grain, and then I shut the tonneau cover. And as I drive, the salt and the grain shake out and it falls on the road and it attracts the deer to the road. And that makes more work for our shop. And I'm like, whoa, shut it down. I don't want to hear this, right? So that's why I say that's like jumping in a Zamboni when it's cold out and hitting the road and putting some ice on it. But so we can't legally build demand, and that's just the reality. That's the reality of our industry. So let's zoom out and take a look at the customer journey and whether you're watching this and you're a body shop or you're an insurance company, an information provider, a parts provider, whatever your role is in our industry, if we zoom out and look at the customer journey, you're going to find your place in it. And I want to challenge you to think about moving upstream. So here we go. So as you think about the customer journey, everybody's got a lake. So let's just use a body shop as an example. If you're a body shop, there's a lake that you might draw from. Call it a town of 100,000 people, right? If you supply a country with software, maybe it's all of the US or maybe it's the world or whatever it is, but you'll have a marketplace, okay? And your marketplace is like a lake. So picture this as a lake. So here's what you need to know about vehicle owners. 57% of the vehicle owners in any given marketplace, whether that's a town of 100,000 or the entire US, only 57% of those folks have no damage or don't need the services of collision repair. That's just the way the numbers shook out, right? And so when you think about the way the human brain is wired, the behavioral scientists that looked at this, see, we are programmed as humans to move away from pain and move towards pleasure. So do this with me now, okay? With your left hand, draw a square, okay? And with your right hand, draw a circle, Okay, draw a circle and a square. Just try it. And if there's people watching you, I apologize. But what's going to happen now? Go a little faster, right? And as you're trying to do this, what happens is you end up doing two circles. See, your brain wants to move away from the pain of drawing a box, and it's just easier to draw a circle. Okay, and that's the way our brains are wired. And so we're always trying to move away. They're not thinking about an accident. Vehicle owners aren't thinking about what happens to me when I get in an accident. They're thinking about where am I going to go on my beach vacation? That's what really is important to me. And so that's just the way the human brain is wired, okay? And so those 57% of people in any given marketplace, remember that those people, they don't have a high degree of purchase motivation. Here's another example, Pry Brands. Let us know in the chat box, have any of you heard of Pry Brands before? Well, Pry Brands is an interesting company because last year they spent $966 million. It's a Pfizer drug for breast cancer. They spent $966 million advertising it on radio and on the TV and on billboards, on park benches, all over the place, in airports. I've seen it in airports now that I'm aware of it. But the crazy thing is most people haven't heard of it, have they? And despite spending almost $1 billion to advertise it to you, it doesn't really resonate with most people. And so what I'm telling you is that customer, that vehicle owner could care less about our industry, care less about us until one thing happens. And that's when they get in an accident, okay? We call this the buying mind frame, right? So now the customer's had an accident. 2 minutes before that, they could care less about our industry. Now we're incredibly important to them. Make sense? Okay, so what I'm saying is we could spend $1 billion telling these people about our industry, but the chances are it's not going to resonate. They're going to just dismiss it because they don't need it, okay? Just like what happened with Pry Brands. Now, here's the good news. The good news for our industry is 43% of people in any given marketplace, 43% of them do have some degree of damage. And I say degree of damage because it usually falls into the category of small, medium, or large, okay? So stick with me on this one. The buying behavior of a customer changes based on the kind of damage they have. Let me paint you a picture. So they're in the buying mind frame. They just got some damage, but picture that damage as being small to start with. So we call this 0 to 12 hours in body repair, but you know, often we'll find people who are making this buying decision, they can do it right away, some of them, but a lot of them will defer and put it off, and sometimes they'll put it off for years, right? When you're walking around the parking lot at the shopping mall next time, notice how many vehicles have damage like this when you're at a service lane at a dealership. Watch how many vehicles have some kind of damage like this. People tend to put that off. Now, what happens is that buying mind frame shrinks as the damage grows. Isn't that interesting? So as you look at medium-sized damage, we find people will either get it fixed right away, or maybe they'll wait up to a couple months, okay? But again, that window gets smaller the heavier the damage. So if we look at a large hit, we find it's often dealt with in hours or just a few days. Right? Makes sense because it's their daily driver. They need a vehicle. It's, you know, I got to deal with this. I'm forced to deal with it. So very different buying behaviors based on the size of the damage. So if you were to ask any body shop, and I do this all the time, I ask shops, what would you want to fill your shop with? And 90% of the time, they're going to say that small and mid-sized damage. They want that small to mid-sized damage. That's a more profitable work. It's the fewer headaches, those kind of things. So let's go back to the lake here. So here we are in our little analogy, and we know that these vehicles are going to start moving downstream towards the body shops. Okay, so here we are. They're starting to move, and I don't have a better name than Repair River. I'm sorry, I couldn't come up with anything better than calling it Repair River. But here they are. They're going to start flowing downstream. And what's really interesting is only 2% of people are active in any given market. So if your marketplace is 100,000 or it's the all of America or whatever it might be, only 2% of people are actively looking for collision repair or body shop repair. Isn't that interesting? And that can fluctuate. So if there's a hailstorm or icy roads, that might bump up to 3%. If it's something where it's dry roads or maybe during COVID where we saw it drop, you know, it may fluctuate, but as an average, the analysts came back and said it's 2%. That's it, 2%. So here they are moving downstream, which is interesting because if we go back to the lake here, that means there's a lot of people that aren't doing anything. And I got really interested by that. So the analysts looked at it and they said, you know what? 10% of these people are unqualified. And so that might be somebody that has rust or maybe it's a restoration vehicle, or maybe they're going to fix it themselves. They'll go to Walmart, buy a spray can, fix it themselves, or maybe they got a family member or friend that's going to help them out and fix the vehicle for them. 10% of that market just is not going to be doing business with the body shops, the collision centers, and our industry. Another 31%. Now here's this is my little secret right here for you. 31% of customers are hibernating. Okay, so if you're in a town of 100,000 people, that means 31,000 people have some degree of damage, and it's usually that small to mid-sized damage that people have been deferring or putting off. Isn't that interesting? Now, there's a whole science to how to unlock the hibernating customer, how to wake them up and get them moving towards the body shops, but I don't have time to tap into that today. That's a different segment. But what I can tell you is these customers, they're starting to move downstream towards the shops. So on the screen now, you're going to see these little red triangles, and these are like islands. So if you picture a river flowing downstream, what does an island do? Well, it divides the flow of traffic, doesn't it? So as you see customers going around the island, we call these the island of influence. And so if you think of who in our industry influences a customer, go ahead and put it in the chat box for us. But who influences a customer? Well, it might be somebody like a dealership, right? Or maybe it's an insurance company. Call and say, hey, I've had an accident. What do I need to do? The insurance company is going to say, go and check out these 3 shops. Family and friends. OEMs are now starting to take action here. We're starting to see more in the telematics stuff, and I'll talk about that in a second. Fleet companies, other businesses, agents, brokers, right? These are all upstream influencers. These are people who start to split up the flow of traffic as it flows downstream towards the body shops. Okay, so keep going down with me here. Let's scroll down. We're not done yet. So they're flowing downstream, and they come up against a second chain of islands. And these are the secondary influencers. So picture this. The insurance company says, I want you to go and check out 3 body shops. What does that customer do? Well, they're going to go online. They'll look at a website or marketing efforts or social media, or maybe do a Google search and look at online reviews. And, all those different things have an impact on where they're going to go. But they're nowhere as powerful. The secondary influencers are nowhere as powerful as the primary or the first influencers. Okay? So just keep that in the back of your mind. Now, what we see is the average customer will consider 3 body shops. Okay, they're going to look at 3 places to go. That's usually their consideration set. We saw it swell. We saw it grow a little bit during COVID, but for the most part, they're going to look at 3 shops. And as they're looking at them, they kind of go in this holding pattern. They're considering shops. And then finally, they will make a buying decision. They'll make a decision and say, you know what? I'm going to go with this shop. So now we've got them in what I call the repair tube, right? So now we've got the customer. We're going to repair them. And there's a couple different touch points that happen with a customer. We're going to book the repair, and they're going to drop off their vehicle, and they're going to check it in. And then maybe the shop will look for prior damage, and then they'll try and do some upsells, and they'll provide them with a rental car, repair updates. And then finally, they're going to deliver the car back to the customer. Okay. We're going to provide them with a warranty. And then now they get pumped back up into the lake. Okay, so they're going to maybe get a CSI, they're going to maybe get a thank you, and now that customer is going to get maybe some post-repair marketing, but they're going to come back into that lake as a repaired vehicle. Okay, and they're going to fall into that 57%. So I'm going to pause there for a second. Go ahead and take a screenshot, because this is everything you need to know about upstream thinking. This is the life cycle. So no matter where you fall, whether you're an information provider, a parts provider, a body shop, a rental car company, whatever you might be, watching this, you're falling somewhere into this equation. And so every 7 years on average, that customer is going to repeat this cycle. Okay, they're going to go around this cycle. So the reason I share this story with you, the reason I go into this with you, is I want to start conditioning you to think about upstream. How do we move upstream? So that's my secret number 1, is upstream thinking. And for myself, here's how I learned about it. So there was this challenge that I faced. So I had a national hail team. So we'd fly around the country. Everywhere a hailstorm would hit, we'd show up. We were like some of those hail gypsies that you hear about out there. We'd show up and we'd start fixing cars. And one of the targets for us was, of course, dealerships. So we'd come to a dealership, and 24 hours after it hailed, we'd be on the ground. I'd have my team there. We'd show up at a dealership that's just got 500, 600 cars with damage. And we go in and want to talk to the dealer principal about fixing all their cars. And invariably what would happen is we'd walk in, and the dealership would be full of hail guys. They all did the exact same thing as us. We all fly in at the same time, and the dealer principal's bombarded by 15, 20 guys saying, hey, I'll fix your hail. I'll fix your hail. I'm better than the next guy. and it was nothing but a mess. And I was so frustrated because I'm like, I can't get an inch here. Like I'm stuck. And so what we ended up doing is start trying to think upstream. Okay, and upstream thinking. So here's what we ended up doing. I sat my team down and I said, okay, when we show up at these hailstorms, it's too late. What can we do? So we mapped it out. We said, okay, here's all the geographical areas in North America that get hit by hail. And we studied it out and we looked at it and we said, okay, all these areas get hit by hail. These towns are really susceptible to hail. Let's go there before it even hails. So we would go to the dealer principals at these dealership chains and at these different places, and we'd say, hey, we'd like to come have a meeting about catastrophe response, a hail response plan, and we've built a hail response plan for you. So there's nobody else. There's no other hail guys there. We're the only ones in the room with a dealer. He had no other choices, really. And we'd say, look, we've determined based off our analytics that you are in a hail zone. And it's just a matter, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when you're going to get hit by hail. And it creates absolute chaos. We've seen it hundreds of times. It'll create absolute chaos. So we've built a hail response plan for you. Here it is. And we map it out and say, here's what happens. It hails within 24 hours. We'll have a team here. We'll work with the insurance company. We'll fix the hail for you. We'll have a service level agreement. So when it hails, you just reach in the drawer and pull this out and we'll help you. That's upstream thinking. Does that make sense? That's upstream thinking. So here's another one. Here's a company that I have a lot of respect for. So let's look at our little chart. Downstream is the rental car, right? So when you look at the rental car companies, let's look at Enterprise and Integral. I have immense respect for these folks. So they've been working at this as well. They're like, wow, we're way downstream. Like the customer's already made the decision and it's way downstream. How can we move upstream? How can we move upstream? So they've recently released this thing called Smart Assist. You've probably heard about it or seen it, but the whole premise, the whole purpose of this is, hey, we can help people upstream. We can help our upstream influencers, the folks like insurance companies or whoever it might be. We can actually help them with analyzing the damage and gauging the severity and selecting a repair shop, right? They're doing everything they can to nudge themselves upstream so they can help. They can help somebody else out upstream. Mary Mahoney, I've got great respect for her. She's now gone so far upstream that she's actually helping with Rankin College, helping train new technicians that are going to come into our industry. And they're a rental car company, right? This is upstream thinking, and it's incredible. Here's a company that I'm involved with, the Automotive Protection Bureau, right? And I love this because we had to start thinking upstream. So for those of you who don't know what it is, the Automotive Protection Bureau helps shops provide a nationwide warranty across US and Canada. And it's the only warranty. See, the big problem in our industry is when a vehicle is sold, all warranties become void. And that kills the resale value, doesn't it? But this is the only warranty. When it's a certified shop, the warranty can be transferred to the next owner, and that creates a higher resale value. Now check this out. So the warranty is way down over here, right? It's way, way down in the life cycle. So we started looking at it, and they came to me and they're like, what can we do to move upstream? What can we do to move upstream, right? And so we started thinking upstream, and we knew that 91% of vehicle owners know that they're going to lose they're going to lose resale value on their vehicle after it's been fixed at a body shop. So we started thinking, hey, can we leverage that as an education tool? Right? So the certified shops can now give their customers a report that says something like this. Hey, look at your Kelly Blue Book value is about $30,000. If you're to go to a traditional body shop and you go to sell the vehicle, you can expect that the resale values is going to get beaten up quite a bit. However, if you use an AMP certified shop that's got OEM accreditations and the vehicle's fixed better and the warranty's transferable, look what happens. The resale value is much, much higher. It's still not 100%, but it's still much higher. And this creates an upstream effect. So much so that we've even gone so far as to empower some of the negative things to become positives, right? There's a lot of negativity around things like Carfax, right? So we've empowered the customer. We've allowed the customer the ability after their vehicle's fixed to actually display it as good news, right? Display it as good news. Give that opportunity to the customer, the vehicle owner, where they can say, hey, I want to prove to the next owner that my vehicle's worth more. So it actually shows up as good news that the AMP warranty is on that vehicle, and it's going to positively affect the resale value of that vehicle. So this is upstream thinking. So what can you do? My challenge for you, secret number one, is what can you do to start upstream thinking? How can you position yourself upstream? Does that make sense? Okay, cool. All right, let's go into secret number two. Secret number two is moving away from fear and moving towards freedom. And so I thought about some of the things that we've been working on, and I'm going to share some stuff because we saw that when 72% of executives fear the rate of change, and I'm really no different. Like, it excites me, but it scares me at the same time. I don't know if you're in that position, but that's how I feel about it. And so let me give you a scary little update on some of the technology that you may not even know about yet. Okay, so this is some scary new technology. So this is a nanoparticle that is being embedded into different substrates. Okay, so you can go into paints, it can go into plastics, and it is a near field communication nano chip. So it's literally like such a tiny little computer chip that in a square inch, there's hundreds of these little chips. And what they do is all they do, and so this is being done by the aerospace. The aerospace engineers are working on this. And so these little chips, they communicate with each other. And so think of this in plastics like headlights and bumpers. It could be embedded into painted surfaces or e-coats that cover, painted like metal parts or aluminum parts. And the job of these little nanoparticles is to talk to each other. Okay, and so as that vehicle, think about what that means. So if somebody was to come along and put a little key scratch in that vehicle, that little particle would say, oh, I got a key scratch that's 2 inches long. Or if it gets in an accident, like what you see on the screen here, instantly those particles can talk and say, hey, my frame rail has moved over 3 inches. My, all these different components are damaged. And so it can analyze the damage extremely fast. And so they started looking at how can we use this technology in aerospace to measure the flex in wings on aircraft. So they came to me and they're like, hey, we'd like you to tag in and consult on this and give us some ideas. Would this work for vehicles? Will this work for manufacturers? Will this work for aftermarket? Can they put this additive in their paint? Can they put it into their repair cycle downstream, right? So this is incredibly interesting. Think about even subrogation, right? Somebody comes along, they open their door into the side of your vehicle, instantly it turns on the cameras in the vehicle, takes a picture of who hit them and documents the damage. Instant subrogation. I mean, massive impacts across insurance, across the repairers, across, estimatics. Incredible stuff that people are looking towards the future. And this is the speed of change. This is the speed of technology. So how do we as an industry keep up with this? How do we embrace this kind of technology, right? And so I want to give you a few things to think about. The threat of the tractor on the farmers in the early days, right? In the early days, they'd be out in their field, tilling their field and working away, and somebody starts talking about there's new technology called the tractor that's coming along. And these guys, they were afraid of it until those that actually embraced it, they quickly found that the benefits far outweighed their fears. And today, tractors are an essential tool. Like, we can't ever go back. And you're going to find that with a lot of technology. Once we've embraced it, there is no putting that genie back in the bottle. Right? We can't go back anymore. And so when we look at organizations like the military, right? How do they keep up with it? I mean, we're talking about national defense here for a second, right? We're talking about the safety and security of our population. How does the military do this? And we have to be secretive about what we're doing, but we also have to be able to adapt to technology. And this is an interesting paradigm, isn't it? Okay. And so as we look at it, and this is some data that was shared with me about the Department of Defense. In their 2022 budget, they spent almost $106.6 billion was allocated to just research and development. That's 20% of their total budget is research and development, finding out. And it's not just trying to build stuff themselves. No. They look outside. They look outside of their organization. I'll share this story with you. One of my patent attorneys actually told it to me. So he came to me and he's like, hey, Ryan, we've been working on this cochlear implant for animals. And I'm like, well, that's weird. What are you doing there? He's like, well, I got a story to tell you. He's like, so we started out by building a cochlear implant to help disabled people. So people with vision impairments or hearing impairments, and they could implant the cochlear implant into a seeing and hearing, a guide dog, a guide dog. And it would transmit from the cochlear implant to the cochlear implant in the person who is disabled. And it would help them with hearing, it'd help them with vision. And this was their ambition. And they figured this out, how to do it. And so it wasn't, but he said, like, in short order, they get a knock on the door. And it's the military. And they come in and they're like, hey, we want to talk to you about your cochlear implant. So they sit down, they're talking about this, and they're like, look, we have a lot of interest in this. Tell us, could this be embedded into, I don't know, let's say a rat, right? Or what about a pigeon? Could we put a cochlear implant into a pigeon? And they're like, where are you going with this, right? And so, of course, they were keenly aware of things that are outside. Originally, it started as a medical device. All of a sudden, it becomes a potential spy device where it could be embedded in a rat rat could go into wherever, you know, a potential terrorist situation where people are, and it could become like a seeing and hearing device that is camouflaged as an animal because it's an animal, right? So you see the military constantly looking outside of their sphere of what they can do. There's so many creative people out there. There's so many people, like a lot of you probably on this call right now, are incredibly creative people, incredibly bright people working on things. And the military will look out there and say, what can we find that's going to help us, right? Maybe it's some guy in a tinfoil hat in his basement. I don't know. But, you know, this is incredibly important things to keep that open mind when it comes to technology and be aware of it. The second thing on this standpoint that the military really drives home is they need to follow a standard. Okay, and this is kind of a shout out for CIECA, if you will, right here, because one of the things that's incredibly important is you might create something, but it needs to be able to communicate with other things, right? So they might get a cochlear implant, but if that implant can't communicate with a headset that that the military is wearing, well, then we got a problem. So they have handbooks for everything. They have guidelines for everything with stringent, but still have the flexibility to work with others. And so that's one of the things that I truly love about CIECA is that standard that we can all look to and communicate with each other. And that is where you don't get left behind. If you create something that is, you know, your standard and nobody else can talk to it, you're going to get left behind. That's just the reality of our world. And so that's a powerful, powerful thing. Okay. Secret number 3. Let me just have a look at this one here. So secret number 3 is how to surf this wave of technology. And I like this picture you're seeing on the screen because so often I see this where an organization is getting crushed by these waves of technology. And we see that out there, right? Where it's like a tidal wave, like this boat here that comes along, it's technology, and you just weren't positioned quite right, and it capsizes you, it rolls you, it destroys you. So a big piece of what I want to talk about now, after we've talked about the first two, is really this. See, inexperienced surfers are going to chase the wave. Isn't that interesting? That's what inexperienced surfers. So I love to get out and do some surfing, some kite surfing. And as I'm out there, I always see that you can tell the inexperienced surfers because they're out there paddling their hearts out trying to catch the waves. Okay. And let me back you up to this had been 1995, right? When I was just getting into the collision industry. From a marketing standpoint, there was really only 4 channels, right? We had radio and we had some yellow pages, and I'm sure some of you guys are still enjoying the benefits of yellow pages, right? But there was TV and, you know, the newspaper, but that was really it. Now let's fast forward. Look what technology has done just even to that space. Today, there is 7,400 different marketing channels that you can take advantage of. And so I get this all the time. I get big organizations from OEMs all the way down to mom and pop shops and the little body shops that are like, holy cow, 7,400 marketing channels. What am I going to do? How do I do that? How do I approach each one? So I'm going to share this with you because this has really helped a lot of my team and other folks around the globe. It's a little Japanese parable called the lion's gaze. And so when you throw a ball for a dog, what does it do? It runs out, it chases it, right? It's chasing that ball. But when you throw a ball for a lion, do you know what happens? When you throw that ball for a lion, it just keeps staring right at you. It could care less about some dumb rubber ball. You are the tasty treat, right? It's keeping its eye on you, and it's unnerving. And so don't chase the latest craze. Don't, in a marketing situation, I tell them, don't chase the latest marketing craze. Rather, focus on the customer. And this simplifies everything down when we focus on the customer. Matter of fact, when we look at human behavior, that simplifies it even further, okay? So think about this for a second. If you were to walk out to your lobby, let's say, or into any waiting room, whether it's a doctor's office, a dealership, a body shop, it doesn't matter. Everybody is on their phone. And I get this all the time. They're like, Ryan, everybody's on their phone. Everybody's addicted to their phones nowadays, right? You can agree with that statement, okay? And so what happens is, that's true. But the human behavior, let's go back to 1940. Let's just back up. I'm going to show you a picture here. Let's see if I can get it to come up. There we go. A picture from the 1940s. Everybody's got their face stuffed in a newspaper. They didn't have phones, so they put their face in a newspaper, right? The delivery method has changed, but the human behavior hasn't. If you track the human behavior, the speed of technology changes quick, but human behavior really doesn't. And human behavior is what really is going to guide the outcome of a lot of this technology. Does that make sense? Okay. And so focus on the human behavior. The experienced surfers, okay? The experienced surfers out there, what they'll do is they'll paddle out, They watch the waves, they watch the conditions, they position themselves, like the first thing we were talking about is position yourself upstream. They'll position themselves, they'll be aware of all the conditions, like secret number 2, aware of all the conditions, and then they'll wait. And they'll sit there, and it looks like they're not doing much, and they're not paddling around like inexperienced surfers, but when those waves come, they've positioned themselves so that they can catch the wave. Does that make sense? And so watch this stuff that's happening around you. For us at BodyShop Booster, one of my other companies, one of the things we've been watching for is the admin pressure. We've been watching this immense pressure growing on the body shops. And so we've seen it where they're handling all the stuff for the insurance companies, from total losses to all their paperwork, their evaluations, their teardowns. Now they're looking up OEM repair procedures and all this stuff. And I get on the daily, we get shots from all over the globe saying the admin pressure just doesn't seem to stop growing. Matter of fact, in 1995, when I was just a young man getting started, I had one person in the front office and I would have 4 production staff in the back. That was my ratio, right? Now today, you go into most body shops, you're gonna see 1 person in the front office, 1 production staff in the back, right? We're going the wrong way. We're trying to be lean and everything in the back, but our leanness on the admin side isn't really there. And so we've been watching this, and that's what we've been working on at BodyShop Booster. Our focus is, how do we help with the communication? How do we help with that admin burden, right? And so we've been building these different systems and bolting them together. Everything from like assignments, right? Helping the shops communicate with assignments through automation and through AI and through technology. You know, and what was it, 2014, we came up with some of the early photo estimating tools and video estimating tools, but there was a gap. We had to have the humans sit in there and write the estimate. Then we'd have a system where like, whoa, how is it with photo estimates right now? If you go and look at the, you know, job capture summary inside of your system, most people are looking at it going, wow, I'm under 10% capture rate on photo estimates. Why is that? Why is that, right? And so we ended up looking at it and saying, whoa, that's terrible. We need to build a sales tool. So we built the tools to sell a customer, right? We position yourself, we're like, okay, cool. The next thing is we need a sales tool. And so now, immediately by using the sales tool, we see a 35% increase in capture rate, just like that, right? Things like following up. We knew that following up on those estimates and allowing the customer to book a repair, and working with incredible partners like Enterprise Rental Car, where the rental car can be booked in stream by the customer real time. So all these things like upsells, the shop needs to be more profitable. Why can't we take over the upsell piece for the shop, and signing the repair documentation like a DocuSign, and all the appointment reminders? But there was a gap, right? So here's where we are today, and there's a gap. And that gap is not being filled by us. Right now, we still need, in this hole here, we need an estimator to jump in there, go into a certain collision program or whatever and write the estimate. But now, with somebody like an artificial intelligence like Tractable, right? And we started working with Tractable on this and other AI companies, that AI can fill that void, right? So all of a sudden, from first contact with the customer to dropping the keys on the desk, there's no longer any need for humans in that equation. Boom. You see what happened there? It's completely seamless where customers can drop it on there. So those are the technologies we positioned ourselves. We are waiting, and now that wave of AI technology to help with estimatics is now readily available, we plug it in and away we go, right? Position yourself so you can set yourself up to ride the wave. Whew. Okay, so that's a lot. Let's do a recap. Upstream thinking. What are the things that you can do? Where are you in that customer journey? And how can you start thinking upstream? How can I move myself upstream? And maybe you're like us with the warranty. It's like, wow, we're downstream. There's nothing we can do. Look to the other interactions that are happening upstream. Look to the influencers. What can we do to position ourselves with them? What can we do to help them with our technology, right? The other thing is secret number 2, from fear to freedom. How do we embrace this change, right? Think about some of the lessons the military learned. How do we follow a standard? How do we work with others in our industry? That's an incredibly important thing as well. And then the final secret that we just talked about, surfing the wave. Find your position. Don't paddle around chasing every little ripple that you see. Don't paddle around wasting your energy. Position yourself and be aware of your conditions and wait for those waves to come and be ready that you can surf it. So, boy, we've covered a lot of material, right? So sometimes I know I talk really, really fast, and I've had a lot of people say to me, Ryan, I kind of feel like after listening to one of these webinars that it's kind of like this kid where it's like, whoa, there's a lot of information coming out of that hose. So what I wanted to do, and I think Stacy's been in the background collecting questions. So if anybody's got any questions, why don't we take a few minutes to go ahead and jump in and take some questions from the crowd, and hopefully you guys got some good value out of this. Hopefully you got some good help out of this. Let's go ahead and do that. Stacy, if you'd be so kind to jump in here.
Sure. Thanks, Ryan, for sharing great information. The first question is, where can our attendees learn more about Upstream Thinking and read about some of the ideas you covered today?
Yeah, that's a great question. If they want to send me an email, I'll have my assistant checks my email, and it's not a huge crowd, so we can put it in there. It's just ryan@bodyshopbooster.com, and then send me an email, and I'll have my team send out this presentation as well as some backup documentation around Upstream Thinking as well. Some of the research that we collected. We'd be happy to share that with you.
Thank you. And in light of the changes taking place, would you say the big companies have an advantage?
Well, I think that's a great question. So when we look at things like artificial intelligence, data is, the bigger your data set, it's perceived as being an advantage, right? So you take ChatGPT as an example, the bigger the data set, the more intelligence they seem to get out of it, providing that it's good data, right? If it's good, clean data, that's going to definitely be helpful, and that should be an advantage for the bigger folks. But what I would say around that is you know, a lot of the little guys, a lot of the little people have the ability to move faster, right? And speed is an incredible thing. Actually, I actually have a slide here, right here. This is one of my favorite quotes, and I always like to talk about, is the world is changing very fast. Big will not beat small anymore. It will be the fast beating the slow. And so this is Rupert Murdoch. So we often see that big was an advantage where you've got endless resources and endless money, but it also creates that slowness, right? It's harder to adapt to change as a bigger organization. And so that's the thing to watch for, is speed is going to be the thing. Matter of fact, I don't know if you guys ever did this. Remember back in the day when you first got the credit card and you walk there and they got the carbon copy thing where you like scan it and then you got to fill it out and then the person's got to sign it and then you rip it out and give them their carbon copy of their receipt. And that was cool, right? It was better than a check. And then all of a sudden the technology came along where you could swipe the credit card. And I'm talking micro changes here, like swipe the credit card, it prints it out and you just sign it. Less to fill out. Oh, that's great. I can't ever go back to the carbon copy. And then they came along where you can insert the card and put your PIN number, right? Oh, that's great. That's so much better than having to grab a pen and sign somebody's paper copy. And now they have the tap, right? Where you just tap your credit card. And I'm blown away at myself when somebody's like, sorry, we don't have tap. I need you to insert your credit card. I'm like, oh, so inconvenient. I got to punch 4 digits in. Are you crazy? Right? So that's what we see is once that technology has been available and we've got an experience with it, it's really hard to go back. But those small things, that anything around speed is going to be your advantage, right? So whether you're big, whether you're small, use speed as your advantage. That would be my suggestion there about keeping a competitive edge.
Excellent. Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah.
Those are all the questions we have right now.
Okay.
And Paul has some
Ryan,
comments.
Thank you very much for your comments about standardization and how the military always develops standards. And I think that's a critical point. I think it's human nature when a company develops a new product to think that being proprietary is the advantage. I think that's human nature. And I think the point you make is it's not. It's not the advantage. Adapting and building a standard always allows for faster and greater adoption of a product and greater integration into the ecosystem. So I think that was a great point.
Yeah, no, I'm a big believer in that, and really I've learned that lesson the hard way with some of my technology companies. You know, people are like, this is great, we should work together, but we can't make them talk to each other, right? And it just kills the deal. So those are some things to definitely keep on the radar, and that's a big thing. That's why I like you guys so much. So.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you have that perspective. Well, hey, that was a great presentation. I particularly like the picture of the people with the newspapers. It always cracks me up when I see a bunch of people with the phones and everyone's like, "Oh, this is horrible," and I'm like, was it any better when everybody had a newspaper in their face? Not really.
Exactly. So.
All right. Well, great. Hey, this presentation has been recorded and will be available later today at CIECA.com. I would invite everyone to check CIECA.com for a schedule of future broadcasts and to watch recordings of past webinars. Links are available under CIECAST at the top of the page. You will receive an email with a link to the video or the recording. And CIECA has partnered with the Automotive Management Institute. Attendees of this webinar are eligible to receive a credit towards a professional designation from AMI after taking a short quiz on their website. A link will also be sent to all attendees. Please follow us on social media and stay up to date on any upcoming events and CIECA news. And that concludes today's webinar. Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, everybody. Great to be with you.